Good evening and welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us. Help fund the movement. Help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I am your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota, for episode 141. Today, we have another incredible family and friends guest, none other than Trent Staggs, who is running for United States Senate in the great state of Utah, where Mitt Romney has announced that he will not run for reelection. And the Senate seat there in Utah is up for grabs with an incredible America First and MAGA grassroots support movement. I think Mitt Romney was polling at about 30% with Republicans in the state, which was part of the reason why he probably decided not to run for reelection to save himself the embarrassment. But um, opportunities popping up all across the country for America First to make a difference and get elected to represent you and your interests as American citizens. And Trent Staggs is one of those individuals running in the great state of Utah. So tonight we're going to listen and hear from Trent Staggs on what he plans to do in Utah and what he plans to do if he's elected to the United States Senate. He and I are a part of a group of a number of United States senatorial candidates that have an America First policy approach. Kerry Lake being another one, probably the superstar amongst us, and it's a great thing. It's a great thing to see that other people are making a run at the Senate, which are very, very costly races. So, if you can, please support where you can. 100 United States senators run this country. Make no mistake. Make no mistake about it. The House and appropriations is a very, very important part of the political process here in the country, and the executive branch has its abilities to to affect change. But when it comes to passing bills and new legislation at the federal level, the buck stops with the United States Senate. Or let's say the buck really gets a lot of motion with the United States Senate. And up until now, we have not had a very friendly Senate to the American people. So, without further ado, I bring to you a man running for United States Senate in the great state of Utah, none other than the great Trent Staggs. Welcome, the great Trent Staggs, to Please Call Me Crazy. We're happy to have you, brother. We appreciate your time today, and we're looking forward to getting to a conversation with you. I informed the guest that you were running for United States Senate in the great state of Utah against one of the most formidable uniparty stalwarts in American politics there with Mitt Romney. So I want to get into it today with you about Mitt and Utah and how it, from your understanding, how it became to be dominated by Mitt Romney and what the implications are for the people of Utah. And then we can talk about the broader, American First movement in general. But I'm very interested in Utah. I've been saying on my podcast for the last, I don't know, month or so is, who was voting for these people? I mean, who was voting for Mitch McConnell in Kentucky or Lindsey Graham or Nikki Haley or, Mitt Romney? Who voted for these people? I'm having a tough time understanding, how this I mean, I know how it works from a political standpoint, but I mean, just on boots on the ground, people, I mean, how are people convinced to vote for these people? Or are they getting bullied? Are they using the political process and are they such veterans in the political process that let's say they undermine candidates like you before the constituents ever get a chance to make that choice? So go ahead. We appreciate having you. Tell us a little bit about your race and what's going on there in Utah.
Yeah. Well, hey, first of all, thank you. Great to be on the program. And I'm glad for the interest in the state of Utah. We told to so many people across the country now. I've been campaigning for about 6 months, and it means a great deal, I think, to all Americans that we get somebody in there who is America first and who is a true constitutional conservative that can advance, our principles it means a great deal to everybody, not just those in the state of Utah. And, as witness of that, I've now been able to raise donations across all 50 states as the Romney challenger. I mean, that's something that is pretty humbling. I didn't think that would happen when I first announced in May, but here we are. And, that's something that is a main reason why I decided to run, because I've been in this state, as an elected official for the last 10 years. I'm the mayor of a city called Riverton, and we're a top 20 city by population in the state. We only have about 3.2 million people in the state of Utah, but this is home. I've grown up here from elementary school to graduate school. I've attended Utah schools. I've operated businesses. I helped take a company public. I listed on NASDAQ last year. And so serving my community as long as I have, I care deeply about the state and where we're going, and I care deeply about the country. I want to ensure my children have the same type of opportunities that I did. I was one of 10 kids. I grew up very poor to maybe middle class. We broke into. My dad was a high school teacher and football coach, and we just grew up without a whole lot. And, because of this great country that we live in, we're able to climb up, so to speak, and have some level of success. And so I'm grateful for that. But, it's being threatened. It's being threatened for sure with the uniparty and the type of establishment, ship of fools, if you will, that have been running the country for so long. And I'd had enough. Mitt Romney moved to Utah 6-7 years ago. He ran 5 years ago in 2018 for the seat. And I remember very well as a mayor, he came and approached me, and he put a commercial out there saying the same thing in the commercial as he said to me. And he said, "If you elect me as your senator, Utah, I'm going to fight for you every day." He said, "I'll put us on a path to a balanced budget. I'll end illegal immigration," he claimed. He said, "I'll stop federal spending and overreach, and I'm going to confirm conservative justices to the court." And of course, 5 years later, that's not been his record at all. It's been just the opposite.
Right.
He doesn't represent Utah. I think he cares a lot more for himself than really representing the state. And sadly and ironically, he cares more about what people think about him that didn't vote for him in president in 2012, and wants to go on those shows on the liberal media and talk about, things that really mostly about being against President Trump, which is just bewildering to many of us here in Utah. So I went out, we announced in May, and we've had great success. We've been able to get national conservative media endorsements like Mark Levin and Charlie Kirk, and Carrie Lake came up here, did a fundraise event for us. Kash Patel, who I know you had on recently, was just here last week. I've got over 100 elected officials in the state of Utah, mayors, my colleagues, county commissioners and council members that have endorsed my candidacy. And so the grassroots have really spoken. I think they said, "Look, Mitt, you fooled us once. We're not going to let you fool us again." And that's why he's made a decision here in late September that he's not seeking reelection. And so we've now got a chance. We've got a great opportunity to get him out, to replace him, who was one of President Trump's biggest opponents, with somebody like myself, who will be one of his biggest proponents in advancing America First agenda. And so, a lot of people have asked me, how did he get elected here? Well, he's not from here originally, but he was able to ingratiate himself, I think, with the culture. And as you so aptly pointed out, Senator Orrin Hatch left, and he's the one that replaced him. And Senator Hatch made a decision not to seek or not to announce anything about whether he was running again or not until about January or February almost of 2018. And so it became very late in the game for anybody else to get in, not knowing what his intentions were. And then the very next day or so after he said he wasn't seeking reelection, he went on to endorse Mitt Romney. And so there was a little bit of that going on too. And that kind of led into just almost a coronation feeling with Mitt. But again, his voting record, his lack of care and attention for Utah has really stood out, and people become wise to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the grassroots, you're seeing it all across the country, and we have a number of people that are running for United States Senate in this cycle. Myself, yourself, Kerry Lake. We got the great Kerry Lake running there in the state of Arizona. I was pleasantly surprised to see her announcement, and then we got the gentleman there in Michigan as well, who's another one we're going to have on the show soon. But we have these real America First Senate candidates popping up all over the country, and I can't stress enough to people how important the United States Senate is, and I want to echo your sentiment exactly. If you're voting for a Senate race or you're contributing to a Senate race, more importantly, you're not contributing for your state. The United States, the problems in this country have become um, so global, for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
that every United States senator is going to be an essential piece of trying to save the republic now, and that's just the situation we've created. Talk a little bit about your policy. I mean, well, obviously, we're right on the brink of all out tyranny when it comes to the technocracy, let's say, and the internet and social media and some of these things. I just had one of my episodes pulled down a week ago for medical misinformation. I guess you can't speak out against these international governing bodies or medical bodies anymore at all. But, when if you are able to get elected and we can get Mitt Romney out, number one, that would be a victory in and of itself by many metrics, obviously. But going on to the Senate floor, what are some of the things that you're looking to bring for the state of Utah, but even more broadly for the American people, given the situation we're in?
Yeah, I mean, our message has been the same since the day one of announcing. If you go to trentstaggs.com, I say, as a senator, I want to champion three things every single day, and that's smaller government, safer families, and a stronger economy. And I've got some policy prescriptions that are tied to each one of those, overarching themes. But it starts first and foremost, I think, with smaller government. And this is something that's not just for Utahns, but for the entire country. I mean,
Mhm.
the size, scope, and the burden of the federal government has far exceeded what our founders ever envisioned. I mean, it's out of control. And we have to the point now where it's gotten so big that it's failing to do, and it does so many things that it fails to do the few and delineated things in the Constitution that it says it's supposed to. So, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution outlines the powers and duties of Congress. One of them being immigration, for example. We know that's been
Yes.
completely um, mismanaged. It's been bungled just as bad as you can. And I think the Secretary Mayorkas ought to be impeached. Only about 5 Republicans actually voted to confirm him as the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, and Mitt Romney was one of those. And unfortunately, and we've got a complete disaster there at the border. But with respect to smaller government, first and foremost, it's the budget.
Mhm.
I have put out a contract with Utah. I've got 7 points on it, and one of those is I will not vote. I will not vote for an omnibus spending bill. Period. I want a balanced budget amendment. And so that to me is important because what we've been doing with passing these continuing resolutions and omnibus spending is we just keep kicking the can down the road. We put
Kicking the
everything in
can.
it,
Right.
kitchen sink, and it ends up being trillions and trillions more every single year that we're spending. And it can't continue. We have a process. It should be there are 12 appropriations subcommittees, and each one of those appropriations committees needs to be producing their own budget, and there should be ample opportunity for debate and amendment amongst senators and on the House side, so we can get to a sense of order. The Congress actually passed in 1974. They passed the Congressional Budget Act, and since then we've only passed a budget on time as a country 4 times. And the last several years, we don't even pass budgets anymore. We just do these continuing resolutions and just keep spending levels basically the same or ratchet up slightly from where they were, and just keep going. And it's ridiculous. So if we get back to a sense of order with a budgetary process, and we've got people in the Senate that have got backbone to be able to do it, we're going to help out tremendously. We're going to stop all the overspending. We're going to stop the inflation. But that to me is the biggest thing. The second thing is the REINS Act. REINS, the REINS Act is something that our Senator Mike Lee has been championing for some time. And what that does, Royce, is it gets rid of this. Decades ago, Congress abdicated its responsibility to these unelected bureaucrats that head all these agencies. And they're creating about 100,000 pages of rules every single year that we have to abide by, that businesses have to abide by, and yet they're not accountable because they're not elected. It would say, look, you can make and you can propose rules, but they've got to come back to Congress. We've got to vote on it before they take effect. And so, I've talked to so many businesses, and having taken a company public, I can tell you that was a very painful experience. All the regulation, it's estimated that all the regulation out there is about a $4 trillion drag on our economy. And it costs the average employer almost $20,000 per employee to come into compliance with all the nonsense and the regulation out there. So that money would be much better served in the pockets, I think, of employees and of businesses. And we've got to get rid of that. So that's my smaller government. We could get into safer families and combating woke, progressivism, fighting for the Second Amendment. And then on a stronger economy front, I'm a huge proponent of energy, not just independence, but I say energy dominance. And we can do it in this country. We did it under President Trump. We can do it again.
Absolutely. I have a question about there are some of these, not all these, there are some cultural and let's say policy inconsistencies within our conservative movement that people like Mitt Romney, as you so aptly put, benefited from during his time as a business owner, entrepreneur, one of these elites. For example, one of these financial elites. We're not against capitalism in the movement, but one of the things that I'm starting to understand more and more, especially after being censored and thinking about it at a deeper level, the conservative movement has been heavily burdened by this belief in free trade, this kind of dogmatic belief in free trade, and free trade without any constraints from the government or any oversight becomes crony capitalism. And when you have free trade, or when you believe that the market will solve for every issue, you run yourself into the problem we face now, where okay, we could have free trade, we could have free market enterprise, and in a lot of cases the market will correct for a lot of things unless you give the government an in, the elected officials an in to the market through backstopping the entire deal with the Fed, and you let them create these monopolies. Now the market can't correct for much of anything, because why would they need to? We're always going to get bailed out. I mean, this was the point that the great Eric Prince made about the idea of boycotting Bud Light. Anheuser-Busch has such a dominant position in the beer and alcohol industry. Right. You could boycott Bud Light all you want. They own 40 other brands, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a beer brand that isn't under their tree, unless you do local craft, which, on a broad basis is gonna be marginal. So, how do we correct, how do we correct some of this outgrowth of crony capitalism and this dogmatic faith in free trade and free market enterprise?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's two kind of components to that. There's the international side, and then nationally too. Some of the arguments or some of the things you just outlined there with the company, for example, that has monopolistic or oligopolistic type of power. A lot of that here nationally is because of the regulatory framework that we're in. So getting back to that REINS Act, and I say taking a chainsaw to it. You can't just take a scalpel to it. No. We've got so much regulation. You've got to take a chainsaw to it. And as I've been campaigning across the state these last 6 months, I've conducted 50 plus town halls. I've talked to a lot of business owners, and they say, Trent, look, I've heard of the phrase too big to fail, but what about too small to succeed? I
Mm.
can't compete and get in there because I can't afford the army of accountants and attorneys that I need just to come into compliance with the regulatory framework right now in the United States. It's out of control. So we need to do that. And as a senator, we can serve on various committees. And I've been asked, what committees would you like to serve on? I'd like to serve on, there's a small business and entrepreneurship committee. There's a finance committee. With my background, I think would be well suited. And then also there is a natural resource committee, which encompasses public lands, which is another big issue here. A lot of people don't realize that 2/3 of our state here in Utah is owned or controlled by the federal government.
Federal government, right?
It's huge. I mean, Nevada's 87%, Arizona's like 40%, Montana, these Western states, a lot of it's owned and controlled by the federal government, and they really restrict any production, any permitting, on these federal lands. So we've got to get through that to get to energy dominance. But I think that helps us with respect to the REINS Act and cutting back regulation for sure. Internationally, you're spot on. I mean, we hear about free trade all the time, but is it fair? Are we dealing with the same set of rules? And I think when the United States and the World Trade Organization members admitted China to the WTO back in the 90s, that was a mistake to do it in the way that they did. And they're not playing by the same set of rules. I know you're a basketball guy, so you liken it to a basketball game. It's like the United States is already starting out with 4 fouls, right?
Yeah.
And China can come in and has 10 fouls or whatever they can do. It's not the same set of rules that they are playing by in the world markets. And so I believe in free trade for sure, but it's got to be fair. Everybody's got to be playing by the same set of rules. And whenever we do that, whenever we have strong laws in place to protect intellectual property and other things, we know that America is always going to be on top.
I'm as much of I come from the War Room Posse and the school of Bannon and that entire movement. So I'm as much of a China hawk as anybody, you could say. And I really I think we could look at the trade practices and the goal of having fair trade across the entire spectrum of the international economy, the global economy, especially with Europe. I think President Trump was right to call into question our deal with NATO and just the fundamental tenets of it. But also, we should look at being a little bit more realistic about China's deal, given that they've all but described themselves as our national mortal enemy in some form or fashion. And so, I'm more of the thought that we should bring a hammer down on China because we could. It's completely shocking to me that these Western scientific managerial elites that always talk about the inexorable rise of China, the second law of thermonuclear dynamics, and the Thucydides trap, and all these Atlanticist political elite ideas that China is somehow this machine that can never be defeated. Everything that China's done, we effectively taught them how to do. And we could just as soon start to reverse the market. That's exactly what Donald Trump began to do. And it's exactly what Joe Biden looked to undo in his first couple of months, days even in office. And then you throw the woke ideology on top of it, and people think that this is a nothing issue. But really what they're creating is a cultural consensus and expectation for us senators, right? And it's profound, because your average voter has their everyday life, their interests, their family, their business, their work, their friends, their whatever it is, their passions, even their hobbies. I mean, all of it comes into play, I guess, but and none of least of which their faith. But everybody, seems to have those interests, but then once you get the woke ideology, working together with the social media zeitgeist and the emotion of likes and reshares and retweets and the whole theater of it, everybody loses their mind. And I can't for the life of me figure out how we are supposed to go carbon neutral and China's going to be regulated by who for their their end of the deal. I mean, let's just assume the climate change thing isn't a hoax to begin with. I had somebody, Maj Toure, was on last week, and he's a huge Second Amendment advocate for the black community, but Americans in general. And he brought the fact that the sea levels at Ellis Island are the exact same as they were when the immigrants came through. And you know, here in Minnesota, we're having a warmer than usual winter. And I have to say, for one, I'm happy about it. If global warming means that the sea levels in Ellis Island stay the same, and here in Minnesota we don't go -20, please give me more global warming. But regardless, I can't see for the life of me how people think we can possibly regulate China's carbon emissions.
Yeah, it's nonsense. You know, when they're putting out multiple coal-fired power plants every single month, and we think somehow, you know, and I've heard as well that the CO2 component of the atmosphere makes up less than 1%. It's like 0.4%. So we're regulating and really costing trillions of dollars to a worldwide economy to try to tackle an issue that makes maybe no difference at all, you know,
Right.
negligible here to the atmosphere. And they've been saying, you know, environmental extremists have been saying every 10 years that there's going to be a catastrophe. And of course, we've lived through them all. So do I believe that we should be good stewards? Absolutely.
Of
That
course.
God put us here. We should be good stewards of this planet, and we all want clean water. And to the extent that we can help improve our conditions here on this planet, absolutely. But at the same time, you know, we can't go ahead and destroy our economy. And I think that's really what it's all about for these globalists. It's an effort to bring down America and ensure that we are weakened, and allow other countries to basically rise up. And not, again, they're not playing by the same set of rules. And so it's absolutely ridiculous. And when you consider too that all of this green movement, for example, is requiring the production of solar panels or turbines or electric vehicles, that many of which require rare earth minerals that aren't even mined in our country. They're coming from China.
Right.
That's a problem. I mean, it's just a huge shift. It's
Some more
government.
dependency. Yeah.
It's government inserting itself to try to pick winners and losers in a world energy and other economies, and it's something that we can't do. I mean, I'm for all the above. Energy, we're all in energy dominance. We should be doing it. And you know, if these environmentalists were really serious about carbon footprints, and they would be the biggest champions for nuclear energy.
Absolutely.
But they're not. You know, that's would be a huge. I mean, it's has no carbon footprint at all, and that would be something that you think they would be able to get behind, but they don't even do that. So I think that tells you right there what their true designs are, what their intents are, and
Yeah.
we
Absolutely.
can't kowtow to that.
Well, I agree with you 100%. I was thinking to myself the other day, because you always get any America First candidate is always attacked, bombarded with any number of claims on social media from anybody who has these fundamental tenets as a part of their political worldview. Climate change right at the top of the list.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking to myself, you know, it's a real sign of a society gone awry when you come up with these sort of self-loathing and self-hating ideas to correct for anything. I mean, there's never a solution that we, the people, at least, I can't speak for everybody else's citizenry in their country, because I can't speak to their values, but it's a pretty basic human principle. I mean, before any nation, the humans' desire to survive kind of took precedent. And you could say that Darwin took that and he perverted it, and then we had some other things come about where we used that type of ideology to justify some things that were very wrong. But the overcorrection is a problem. We can't become so consumed with our mistakes that our result or our remedy is let's kill ourselves.
Yeah.
Let's kill ourselves. Let's, and if you work that down, let's kill the economy. Let's kill our borders. Let's kill the individual family, or whatever it is, the means of production, whatever it is, and again, like you said, there's no evidence that shows that the climate change um, strategies are going to have any real substantive impact on the outcome of their own projections. I mean, this is by their own metrics. I think the latest stat was, if we did everything that they're suggesting by 2050, we may reduce carbon emissions by 1% or less. And I'm being generous when I say 1%. I think it was more like 0.023%. So what is the real suggestion here? You can't even really, unless you're, let's say, blindly following these political worldviews. How do you even come to believe it? They're not even really telling you a lie. They're basically telling you, we're going to kill the American energy industry. We're going to kill America's sovereignty from global agencies. And at the end, we're still not going to affect the carbon emissions anyway. But you should still vote for us and give up your gas vehicle for a Tesla. I mean, it's lunacy.
It is, and people that actually look at it, I think they're coming to the sense that this is not. I mean, the only way that it can be perpetuated is for the media and everybody else to be in on this and kind of just keep propping it up. And it's not. I mean, we're not going to sacrifice. I won't sacrifice the American economy for a bunch of environmental hysteria that, as you pointed out, we don't even have any proof is going to lead to better outcomes. And so we need to do that. The energy is the base really of all of our economy. I was recently endorsed by the Oil and Gas Workers Association of America, great organization, and I've got some experience in that field because the company that I took public is in the energy space. And it's so vital to our economy, and it's really the basis of it all. And if we can have energy dominance again, it's going to bleed into every sector of the economy. It's going to rise, all boats. A rising tide is going to raise all that, I believe, for everybody in this country. We're going to stop importing oil and energy from sources, in countries that don't like us, and that we end up enriching these other nations to our own detriment. I mean, it's just not great. It's not wise policy. And you're right. The Biden administration has
Trent, 1 second. 1 second. Who is it? Who is it? Who is it? I'm on an interview. I gotta get you. Go ahead, Trent. Keep going. We'll find it right where it was. Keep going.
Okay.
Didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's good. So, I think the Biden administration has demonstrated that they're wholly incompetent. They don't have an energy policy, a good one, that is, that they're espousing. And, from day one, he went and tried to destroy everything that President Trump had built. I mean, look at this. In just a few years that Biden's been president, you look at the damage that has been done to this economy. And it's something we've got to correct, and I look forward to doing it with President Trump there again in office here, being elected in 2024, and we'll have a host of senators, America First senators like myself, and I believe Kerry Lake can work with my Senator Mike Lee from Utah as well, and some others in the Senate, that we can finally be at that point where we have enough senators that have reached critical mass, enough America First constitutional conservatives that can reach that and actually move the ball finally.
Well, 100. I mean, I always tell people 100 United States senators run this country. Don't be mistaken about that. We have significant things we can do at the executive level as well. But we need some America First senators, and we need them like yesterday. And I'm not so sure that it's not going to be 2 election cycles before we can actually get enough American First senators, because there's not 3 in there right now from the way that people vote. I'm just going to go on the record and say the genuine America First presence in the Senate is very, very slim. But this election cycle is going to be a big turn of the tide if we can get it done. What are your thoughts on let's talk about military, because the military, and we're living in a time where senators are going to be pressured, as they've been in recent months or the last couple of years, to vote up or down on these wars. I always say that one of the fundamental principles of an America First policy approach is rooted in foreign policy, and one of the real heels of our nation's politics has been these forever wars that we've indulged ourselves in. Where are you at on some of these conflicts that we're in right now? We got Russia, we got the Russia-Ukraine theater, Taiwan, China's always on the brink of, especially as of late, and then we got Israel in the middle, and what's going on in the Middle East. Where are you at on the military-industrial complex, as we call it in the war room?
Yeah, well, it's definitely alive and well and thriving, right? Unfortunately, but just a step back from there, I believe first and foremost, if President Trump were in office today, we wouldn't have the problems that we do. I mean,
Yeah,
this Biden administration, the State Department is so inept that they have allowed this to happen across the world stage. We didn't have these issues under President Trump. He was somebody that was very strong. You pointed out earlier with respect to NATO, for example. They finally, and I've talked to ambassadors that were appointed by President Trump that were serving in Europe and in NATO countries. And they said, hey, it was great because we finally were able to go in there and say, you're going to start paying your fair share. You know, you're supposed to be putting up around 2% of your GDP towards defense. You haven't been doing that. You need to step up and finally do it. The fact that we continue admitting countries to NATO, I know Kash Patel, when he was on and he talked about this on your program, it's absurd. I mean, that wasn't the intent, in the conclusion of World War II, we built that out. Yet we continue to admit members to NATO, like Finland, for example, who's not even paying their 2%. And I had Ambassador Rick Grinnell, for example, who's also endorsed my campaign. He said, Trent, it's unbelievable. What organization or club can you join and not pay your dues? And so we've had people doing that, taking a free ride on the American taxpayer. We're defending. We've got 750 bases across the world. We can't keep doing this. I call that out in my website as well with respect to defense. I mean, we need America first with respect to defense too. And so I am not at all in favor of endless war, of funding these wars. You take a look at Ukraine, that ought to be supported by Europe. That's right in their backyard. It's not to the benefit of the American taxpayer to go another 130 plus billion dollars in debt to defend Ukraine when we don't even have a secure border right now. It's insane. Let's secure our own border. Let's ensure that we have the biggest and the best military for sure. But that, I think, comes down to maintaining naval superiority. We've got a lot of problems right now with our Navy in terms of the age of our fleet, and ensure that we get that back to where it needs to be. We need to ensure that we're still the world's top gun with respect to Air Force, and then also cybersecurity. I think that's something that we need to really step up with. But having these presences and bases all across the world and continuing to bear the burden of that expense on the back of the American taxpayer, it cannot continue.
Yeah, I agree. We definitely have been brought into some, I don't know, some strange kabuki theater where we have decided that America needs to be the police of the entire world. And we just had Henry Kissinger die, who is a fixture of American political history, to say
Right.
the least. And, people, anytime somebody with that much historical gravity dies, is you got people on every side of the thing. But all I see is one of the architects of this globalist foreign policy, and Brzezinski and the whole school, of those guys who not only were we going to be interventionists, but all of our markets, all of our economic essentials would then be tied up in these international affairs as well. It's like
Yeah.
you can't convince me that these people didn't do it intentionally. And this whole idea that, well, if you guys do business together, you won't fight, or if you guys' interests, it's such a naivety, and obviously it hasn't worked since the deal was done, since the post World War II democratic liberal order was put into place. It hasn't stopped war. All it's done is perverted the use of the United Nations, let's say, and the Security Council to greenlight which wars they want to wage. And it's created a huge resent against the American people and the American military and the brand of America on behalf of who? Like you said, Europe is, look, you guys got to kick in. You guys got to defend your own. We're not going to play this game where we're defending Europe at all costs, especially if we're no longer ideologically aligned. And in some cases where we're headed versus where much of Europe is headed, we're not ideologically aligned. We don't want unlimited amounts of Muslims to be able to immigrate into our country in the name of, tolerance or wokeism. I mean, that's just I'm as tolerant as they come in the conservative movement when it comes to, the Christians, Jews, Muslims. You believe in what you believe in, except Satanism. And there's a profound uprising of Satanism that's just walking around in the public nowadays. I saw on Cosmopolitan, they were doing a fluff piece on satanic abortions. Blew
Wow.
my mind. Yeah, I mean, it just how to do a satanic abortion, what it looks like, what it means. It's just
Pure evil.
pure evil. Yeah, I mean, and they're not really hiding it. So there's tolerance, but then there's what's fundamental to keeping a country and a citizenship and the value of your citizenship. That's one of the big things I'm talking about in my campaign to people in Minnesota, is what senators are going to restore the value of your citizenship. Talk about the border crisis and what you see this mass immigration crisis as doing as somebody who's very close to the border in the state of Utah.
Yeah, no, we are. And I just want to make one more comment with respect to national defense and the
Hmm.
military industrial complex. I mean, I got
Hmm.
this from Cash Patel as we were talking. This is part of my contract with Utah. I said that I want a ban. One of my 7 points is I want a ban on retiring members of Congress and high ranking government officials, at least a 10-year ban from becoming a lobbyist or working for a defense contractor. And I
Good
was
good
told
luck,
flat
Trent.
out,
The great Trent
if
Staggs puts a bullseye on his back from the military spooks right out of the gate. Great job, Trent. I love it.
that is something that I'm told would just put a stop to this because it's this merry-go-round of
Yep.
congressmen. They retire or step out, resign. They go to become a lobbyist. They work as a defense contractor and or high-ranking government officials, and so they have that relationship with others. They just keep the money train going, and that has to stop. It has to stop. Um, the
I
board.
think to your point, I think Nikki Haley actually is currently serving on the board of Boeing.
I think you're right. Yeah, I
I
think
think
they
she's actually on
confirmed that.
the board of directors right now, which is and then look, at least look, if you're going to serve on the board of directors for a company in the military industrial complex like Boeing or Raytheon or Lockheed, fine. Okay, I don't agree with it, but at least don't have the audacity to insult the American people's intelligence by going on the national television and shilling for a forever war. I mean, at least don't do us the disservice of pissing on us and telling us it's champagne. But go ahead, continue.
Yeah, with respect to the border, it's out of control. Yeah, Utah, is close to the border. We've got Arizona, New Mexico below us there, just south of us. But it is true, the expression that every state is now a border state. It's out of
Yeah,
control because of the
yeah.
incompetency of the Biden administration, of the Secretary Mayorkas. I recently spoke with the Immigration Customs Enforcement, the ICE field office director for Salt Lake City. And Salt Lake, they represent Montana, Idaho, Nevada, Utah. And he went through the statistics, the 10,000 people a day coming through the southern border. We got about 1,500 at the northern border across from Vermont. Um, and so with that amount of people coming in, we have hundreds of thousands of active cases that they're trying to work here just in this state. Um, I was shocked at the numbers that they have. They actually put out a memo in May that declared Utah a sanctuary state because of the kind of on a de facto basis because of the policies. Yes, I was shocked
Mm,
too because of the
mm,
policies they've implemented here. They didn't have a jail system that was detaining illegal immigrants more than 72 hours. And they claim, well, it's really onerous. You got to work with ICE. They have a 700-page agreement to be able to detain folks. But what about the safety? of the public. And when I'm told that I've got extensive crime in my community because of foreign national gangs, and that there's on average 1 or 2 sexual assaults a day being committed by illegal immigrants in our state, I mean, that's a huge problem. So in early October, I actually called attention to that memo and called on the leaders of our state, our governor and others, to do something. You see other red states like Texas that are really stepping up. And they said, despite the complete failure of the federal government, we've got to be the backstop. We can't just put our heads in the sand and hope that things change. I mean, I want to get there and make that change. But meanwhile, we need, the states are trying to do their part, some of them, to step up and ensure that their citizens are protected, because that's in the Constitution. Kerry Lake even ran on this for governor last year in 22 about the need for Congress in the Constitution. It talks about, it guarantees the safety of its residents, and they're not doing that right now. They're just, this open border mess is really impacting all of us as citizens. And so that has to change. What's the answer? Well, it's pretty simple. I mean, the lowest numbers we had were under President Trump. What do we have? A border wall. We got to complete it. You got to have the Remain in Mexico policy. You got to have E-Verify. I mean, if we just had that, and Utah, unfortunately, as a state, just gutted its E-Verify law. It used to be if you had more than 15 employees, you had to ensure that E-Verify was used. They just jumped it up to 150 employees. So if we had a solid E-Verify, I mean, folks would go through the right process. If they want to work here and they want to be paid here, then you've got to go through a process that gets you the proper, visas and the paperwork that you need so that you can go ahead and get paid. And I think that would, if we stopped offering all these benefits, we had a secure border, we had a Remain in Mexico policy, and we made it more difficult, for folks in that light, then it would be a completely different situation than we have today.
Isn't part of this problem on the Republican constabulary, though, with this whole idea that immigration helps business, and we want the illegal, the illegals has always kind of acted as a blurry line for where we are soft around the illegals. And isn't this part of the whole I call her Ronna McDonald because she's a clown, but Ronna, Mitt Romney, McDaniel, and Mitt himself, who you're running against, but McConnell and this entire Republic. What do you see going forward? I guess that's kind of a statement as a preface to a question. What do you see going forward in your campaign when it comes to the RNC and the support or fight that you'll get from them, and how you plan to combat that? I know I experienced in my congressional race where I tried to run against Ilhan, but the Republican establishment here in Minnesota railroaded me in a primary. What are your fears in Utah when it comes to how strong Mitt has been in the Republican Party and the establishment there in the Republican Party?
Yeah, well, the establishment is a real thing, and I'm not the establishment. We've demonstrated that, and they're concerned, and they do have. Mitt has his handpicked successor. There is somebody here that is running against me. Kind of coordinated his announcement until after Romney had decided not to seek re-election. That is, he's supported by the same donor base, consultancy group, and so we've got to get out there. We've got to remain competitive. Utah's a little bit different. We are such a Republican-heavy state that it's really a race not to the general per se, but to the primary. So by June, whoever wins that Republican primary is going to be the next U.S. senator, essentially. And so that's why we announced as early as we did, so we could traverse the state, start drumming up all that support, which we have, get the fundraising going. We have a state convention in April. And it used to be whoever won 60% of the roughly 4,000 state delegates that are selected at the caucus night around the state. If you got 60% or more of them, you were automatically the Republican nominee. But the Uniparty, the establishment, changed that back in 2014. They now allow somebody to just gather signatures. If you get enough signatures, you can be placed on the ballot, irrespective of the outcome of the convention. So it's made races a lot more expensive. I mean, Senator Lee got in back in 2010. He was able to unseat a 3-term incumbent. And he did that because of the caucus convention system that we had. And now they've changed those rules. So we need as much support as we can get. I've been blessed with a tremendous amount of support at TrentStaggs.com, but we're going to keep after it, continue building the coalition of endorsements nationally, locally, that fundraising to ensure that we will be able to compete in June and bring this thing home, because we know we're going to do very well at the convention. We are the only America First candidate in this race. We've got all the grassroots, majority of them supporting us. And so we'll do very well there, but we have to have the resources to go up on media in front of all the Republican electorate by June, so that we can push back and make sure that people know that the records of those and of the establishment that are trying to run against me, and realize that if they want change, and that's how I've been framing this election. Look, this is all about replacing Mitt Romney with somebody who has the demonstrated resolve and the backbone to say no to the establishment. And I've done it for 10 years in elected office. I was one of the few mayors in our state, the only ones that said no to mask mandates and to vaccine mandates. I've said no to ESG. I've fought against inappropriate materials in schools. I've actually cut our taxes in my community, our property taxes, no fee increases in 10 years I've been in office effectively. Because of the innovation I've brought a business owner's approach to municipal government. We need that approach in DC. We need somebody who understands local governance, local control, the federalism, the proper role of government. I understand those things. That's what I'll take to DC, and I'll work not just for Utah, but the entirety of our country, and bring these great principles to DC.
Last thing before we head out here, I want to ask you about the kangaroo court lawfare being waged against the great Donald Trump, and how do you view what's going on? Is that part of what drove you to get involved in this race at the federal level, and what do you think we can do as United States senators in 2024 when Donald Trump is elected again to office? What can we do to rein in the justice system or the legal system, or the presence of a sort of crony capitalism in the legal industry all across the country, to ensure that these type of things don't happen in the future, that this doesn't become the new norm?
Yeah, no, it is concerning. It is a reason why I'm running, because I've seen not just, 34 trillion in debt. It's unbelievable to me. I mean, I've got a 14-year-old son, 11-year-old daughter. My wife and I, we've said it is the height of immorality to have placed this level of burden of debt on my kids, on successive generations.
Yeah.
They did nothing to deserve this. And so we've had this ruling elite, out of touch uniparty that's done this. The regulatory states run amok with all the regulation we've talked about, but it's also been weaponized. And you can see that against its citizenry. It cannot happen. It can't continue to happen. And what's happening right now with President Trump and the way they have been coming after him nonstop for almost 8 years. I mean, it's unbelievable. If the average person, will just contemplate what they are doing and trying to do, what they've done, what they're trying to do to President Trump, it's because he as well stands up to the establishment. And we need that. We need that so desperately. Somebody that's got that backbone and that actual resolve that will stand up and fight this weaponization of federal agencies against its citizens. I mean, it's unbelievable what's going on. And so as a senator, I think we need, with the power of the purse, we need to be able to get in there and just say this, we are not going to fund these activities, period. That's how we get it. That's how we get it done. Also, as a Senate, we have the ability to approve judges through advice and consent. And I think that is absolutely critical, that we get the right people appointed across the judiciary. And that's going to be very, very important too. So those two things, I mean, let's call out and not fund these efforts. We can call that out in the budget. If we get back to that budgetary process that I talked about with these 12 appropriation subcommittees and make sure that each of these departments are funded properly, we carve out language, we put language in there that states that you can't fund these types of activities. We're not going to use a lot of these agencies to do the things that they're doing, and so that I think is a huge thing, and also the appointment, the confirmation of these judges, and getting the right people on the bench across this country.
Is there a future for America where we, let's say, we destabilize this trajectory where China becomes the new center of the world? Are you a proponent of this multipolarism, or is there a way that America can actually change the course of where we're headed through America First policy and foreign policy?
No, I think we can absolutely change that through America First policy. That's a big reason why I'm running. I mean,
Yeah,
we don't have. I mean, I don't want to become hyperbolic and say this is the most important election, but it is incredibly important.
it's right up
Here's
there, isn't it? It's
It
right up
really
there.
is. If
Yeah.
we don't get in there and change this now, I'm afraid that it may be too late. Um, but we've got a window right now that we can get in there and really push back, get this budget in order, get rid of all the regulation, ensure we've got fair trade, ensure that our NATO allies and other allies are committed to their own defense, and they're going to pay for their share of defense. That is absolutely something that we've got to do right now, and we have to push back really hard on China. I'm happy to see that several states, like my state of Utah, we recently passed legislation that prohibits China from actually buying property. We've gotten rid of the Confucius Institutes at our college campuses. So people are waking up to that, and we've got to keep down that road and keep advancing, advocating America First policies.
Trent, we appreciate you, brother. We wish you well. We wish you success in your fight for American citizens and the America First movement for the United States Senate there in the great state of Utah. We wish to have you back on and give us updates with the campaign when you can. We know it's a busy time with you on the ground there, trying to fight back against what's sure to be a true dogfight with one of the most strongest establishments that's been built in the country. But we support you. We look forward to it. You got the Hatchet Man's blessing. Hopefully, one time I can get to Utah, or you can come to Minnesota, and we can kind of create a coalition of these America First U.S. Senator candidates this election cycle. But parting shots, where can we find you? Where can we get updates on the campaign? Where can we follow you on social media before you head out?
You bet. Yeah, no, and I welcome that. That'd be great. I think we need to work all together to advance that America First agenda across the country. Helps everybody. And I'm TrentStaggs.com. It's STAGGS, TrentStaggs.com, at Mayor Staggs on social. We're on Twitter, on Truth, Facebook, Instagram. But yeah, that's how you can find and follow, and appreciate all the support.
Happy holidays and Merry Christmas to you, brother. Godspeed. We'll talk to you soon.
You too. Have a Merry Christmas.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The great Trent Staggs running for United States Senate in the great state of Utah. An America First patriot, man. I like that guy's view of how to change this country, how to save this country. First, let's save the country. Let's realize we're in a dire crisis right now. And we need sane, logical, reasonable people to step up, give their time, sacrifice their time they could be spending doing anything else, and run for office, to try and save the republic. We need to save the republic first, and then we can change it. Then we can modify it. Then we can make it what we want. We can strive to make it as good as it can be. But right now we're in a crisis. And the number one thing the establishment wants you to believe is that we're not in a crisis, that this isn't a dire moment. This isn't a pivotal moment. This is a pivotal moment for the American people. And like I said before, the referendum is on us, all of us, we the people. The referendum is on us to choose how we want to live, to choose how we want to be governed, to choose how we want to be remembered in history, to choose what we leave for our children. If we leave a country, a real country with borders, with a real legal system, with justice, or some strange global political kabuki theater with kangaroo courts and a wide open border. The choice is yours. The choice is yours, and we get to make that choice in the 2024 election cycle. I hope the people in the great state of Utah will choose Trent Staggs as a genuine America First candidate. And I'll tell you, and like I tell Trent, and like I tell anybody with regards to me, at the very moment where we run on these platforms and we don't live up to what we promise, promises made, promises kept, please hold our feet to the fire. It's incumbent upon you, the citizens, to hold your elected officials accountable. And the way you hold them accountable is to one, know what they're running on, and to secondly, keep an account of the things that they do, the things that they stand for, and the things that they vote for. So in the moment where they deviate from the promises they kept without good cause, you can make an informed decision as a citizen when they're up for reelection. I'm very excited about the number of America First candidates that are in the field all across the country. I see people like Mitt Romney backing out. I see Kevin McCarthy backing out. I see McHenry backing out. All it says is the America First movement, the nationalist populist movement is on the rise, and there's really nothing they can do to stop it. There's nothing they can do to stop it. They can try and cheat. They can try and throw Donald Trump in jail. They can try and censor people off the internet. But the truth will set us free. Human beings have an innate desire for freedom, and therefore we have an innate desire for the truth. You can only brainwash us and indoctrinate us and enslave us for so long before we break those chains. So that's it for me. Please visit freepeopleradio.com. You can visit our store by pressing the store tab. You can also go to freepeopleradio.store to get merchandise and memorabilia from the podcast. We're very proud of and like the merchandise that's available now. Nothing more, in my opinion, than the Godspeed T-shirts. I love the Godspeed T-shirts, but I also, love the Cuck Slayer hoodie. I think we have a cuck epidemic in the country right now, and we got to solve that maybe first and foremost. So visit the store. You can go to freepeopleradio.store to go direct. Buy some memorabilia and merchandise to help support the movement, help support the America First agenda, and people like Trent Staggs, so we can keep having more America First candidates on to talk to you, and hopefully you can vote and get involved in their campaign in their respective area. Other than that, you can also find out where you can watch and listen to the podcast and follow us on social media through freepeopleradio.com. And that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed another Family and Friends guest episode on Please Call Me Crazy. Continue to tune in. We're going to have more and more people on in the next couple of weeks. Alex Jones is in the queue. We're hoping when Owen Schroyer is released, we can get Owen Schroyer on the podcast. I've hosted for Owen a number of times on the War Room of Banned Out Video. We're hoping to get him here on Please Call Me Crazy in the War Room posse. And War Room of Getter and Real America's Voice and Rumble. So that's sure to be epic. We also have on deck Chris Martinson, who is a very, very intelligent individual, as well as Dr. Pierre Corey. And I'm hoping we can get the great Carrie Lake on in the very near future. And also Steve Bannon is in the queue. So we got a number of great people lined up for the coming episodes. We hope you'll stay tuned. And when you see the yellow thumbnails, know that's our special family and friends guest episodes, which are now not exclusive to Friday evenings. We're going to do the guest episodes fast and furious. As soon as people are available in this election cycle, we're going to get them up. We're going to get them on. You can hear me rant for a couple hours. In the meantime, between time, as they say back in the neighborhood. That's it for me. We appreciate your viewership and listenership today and in the future. The fight continues. Please don't die a jerk off. And as always, Godspeed.